would agree that creating a business or engaging in any kind of entrepreneurial activity for that matter is much like building an empire. Joining us in our first panel today are three fascinating young individuals who kindly agreed to share their thoughts, insight, ideas, and story with us and tell us what it's like to run a company, especially during these uncertain times. I will just very briefly introduce the panelists and pass on the mic to themselves to share with us their whole story. First, we have Tara, co-founder of Here We Flow, which is London's first line of socially conscious, organic, and affordable feminine products. Flow started as a small startup and expanded into a business with an expanded product line. Our next panelist is Emma, who's the CEO of Jeffa. And Jeffa is dedicated to change the current rather embarrassing figures of women's access to financial and banking services. Last but not least, we have Fahim joining us as the CEO of Puckett. He was a digital marketer actually for more than 10 years and worked on campaigns for some extremely well-known brands. And he has some extensive experience in crowdfunding. He also has a PhD in disruptive tech startups. He recently founded Puckett, a fully automated advocacy management platform, which enables brands to co-create word of mouth through their community of customers. Well, personally, I can't really wait to sort of hear what you all have to say. I just want to thank you all for joining us today. If we could start with Tara and then move to Emma and then Fahim, tell us a little bit about yourself. How would you describe who you are to us? Also, I just want to make a quick note that please do feel free to just bump in if you have something to add, a comment, a question. I usually tend to pause a few seconds before moving from one topic or a question to another, just to give you guys some time to sort of chip in or add in your comments. I would also like to just quickly remind our attendees that we're running Q&A as we're running through the panel. So if you have any questions for our panelists, feel free to just type it in whenever you like using the Q&A function. Tara, all yours.
Thanks very much, guys. As Atrina kindly said, my name is Tara. I'm the co-founder of Here We Flow. We call ourselves Flow for short, which is also one of the product lines that we have. And our mission is healthier, eco-friendlier personal care for life's messiest moments. And that means basically all the things we think of when it comes to owning a human body and all the really messy and often for women hormonal stuff that we have to go through. So we have organic period care. We have organic bladder leak pads now. We have righteous rubber condoms, which are made from regenerative rubber initiative rubber, which is a higher standard, like the highest standard for rubber on the market. And yeah, so that's kind of been our mission. Who the company is, like when I think about Flow, we wanted Flow, the company, to be kind of like your best friend or who's always kind of in the know and is like, oh my God, I can't believe you're using that product. You have to try this one. But also someone who makes you laugh. So we do all the copywriting and design ourselves. My co-founder Susan and I started out just taught ourselves how to do it. We didn't have a background in design or illustration or anything. So we got some technical help where we needed to, but we really did all that all the bulk of the work ourselves. And so even the copy on our products really talks to you that way. It says like, hello, gorgeous, or makes jokes about pee or period leaks, or on the back of our condoms, it says get naked in big letters. We just wanted to think about like, if we're creating products, how would we want our products to talk to us on the box? And also what would we want this company to act like? What we would want it to give back, because that's something we hold very dear in our own lives, is service and giving back and it being environmentally friendly. So can we get, biodegradable packaging or recyclable paper that's made from recycled paper and all those kinds of boxes. So yeah, that's like how I think about the company. If you're asking, I don't know, was this question meant to be, how would I describe myself or how would I describe the company?
That is a really, really good question. basically I really want to keep the organic flow of the discussion. So go ahead and say whatever you like, really. But this was mostly about yourself, actually.
Okay. Well, as everyone else on this panel can appreciate, I think when you are a founder and you start a company, like there ceases to be a difference. Even if your company has like a different brand than your own personal brand, you just stop thinking, I think, about yourself and you think more about the company. But yeah, so me as a person, I would say when I was younger, I'm 33 now, and I think like Susan, my best mate and co-founder, we had this idea when we were at LSE. So we only launched the company about 3.5 years ago, but we started at LSE about 7.5 years ago. And I would say at that time, I was a lot more ambitious in general. I just wanted to accomplish big things and like in every sphere of life. And yeah, I had like really big dreams. And then I think that was quite a consuming thing for me. I was always like, I've always been sort of a warm and friendly person. That's very important to me, to have people, feel comfortable and happy, and and to support those around me. But I definitely think over the years, the 7-8 years since then, one of the nicest things about being in my 30s is like, I just really calmed down a lot over the years and just became really relaxed. Like, I really want the company to do well because I think it can make a difference in people's lives. And now we have investors and shareholders, and I really want them to get a good return. But yeah, I think like I still want big things with the company, but a lot of the like anxiety around that ambition has gone away. And that makes me such a more like content and happy and settled person. So yeah, I think in the beginning of having the idea, you have a lot more ambition, and that's related to your personality. But over the years, I think I've mellowed out a lot. So I hope that all the nice things are still there, like warmth and wanting to give back and creating a culture of positivity and emotional support for our team and stuff. But that's some of the like like type A-ness I think has really been driven out of me over the years. And I've left that all to my team now. They can be as type A as they want, and I get to be the one that goes, I'm just here to support you. Yeah, that's
completely, that's really relatable, especially when you say as we age, we sort of settle down a little bit, and then it really is relatable, I think. If we could move to Emma, welcome, hello. Could you describe yourself to us and tell us what's the story of Jeffa? If I'm pronouncing it right, by the way, is it Jifa or Jeffa?
Yes, you're really close. It's Heffa, as if the J was an H. But great to see you, Atrina, and I love seeing your backdrop of London. Are you at LSE today?
I'm not at LSE, actually. I'm in my really, really small studio flat. I had to work really hard to afford, but which I'm sure you all understand, especially when we're students. I mean, we were all students one day, so it's really, really hard to sort of keep the balance. But I am in London. As you can see, we're having a snowstorm today. I'm not sure if you can see or not, but it's freezing cold. Yeah, it's freezing cold. And by the way, sorry for mispronouncing your company's name. I apologize for that. Heffa?
No worries, that was great. Awesome. Well, I'm jealous of the snowstorm and jealous of London too. I miss it there. So good to see it through your backdrop. So yeah, I can definitely
get in touch with us if you ever stop by. Do get in touch with us. We'd be more than glad to show you around.
Amazing. I would love that. Hopefully we have another snowstorm next time I'm in town. We can go play in the snow. Awesome. Well, my background is that I've been working in finance for the last 8 or so years. I actually started my career in corporate finance at the world's largest hedge fund. And then I became very interested in financial inclusion. I thought so many of the problems that the world faces as they relate to finance actually don't really affect the 1% and affect the 99. So I wanted to dedicate my career to serving those people. So that initially took me to West Africa, where I started a microcredit organization. We were actually the first microcredit organization to ever lend to youth. So we were in West Africa. So we were lending to clients under 20 years old, which was a really exciting and dynamic experience. And then I went to London. I did my master's at the London School of Economics. So I'm so excited to be here with you guys today. And then I briefly worked with the United Nations as a consultant and went back to Africa, this time in the East, and started a fintech company, a financial technology company, which was focused on serving the under and unbanked populations, meaning people without a bank account. And that's really where the idea for Hefa came from, because while I was building that company, we built that company across 5 different countries. It's still growing. We had millions of dollars coming through the platform in transactions, but we noticed this interesting quirk, which is that 90% of our users were men. And I thought, this is really interesting, because if you look at the statistics of who doesn't have a bank account in the world, there's about 1.5 billion people without a bank account. Nearly 1.4 billion of those are women. So the products that are being built today, whether those are traditional banks or now fintech technology companies, those very much aren't serving the needs of women. So I dug into that and explored why that was. And there's really 2 core reasons. One is the fact that most fintech founders, fintech is like a financial technology terminology, but most fintech founders are men. So about 85% plus globally of fintech founders are men, and they naturally build solutions and products for the demographic that they know, which is men. And then the second reason that I found was far more interesting, actually, and it was that women actually do have unique financial needs, and they face distinct barriers when they try to access financial services, especially in emerging markets. So I thought, this is fascinating. There's no one out there building a solution for this. Let me build a company around this problem. So that's where Hefa came from. In Spanish, Hefa means girl boss. So it's a fitting name for us. And that's kind of my origin story of how I got to Hefa and where I landed up. I'm super excited to be here with you guys today with Fahim, Tara, Fabiola. I think this is going to be a great conversation. So really looking forward to diving in.
Absolutely, Emma. Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. And may I just say, I'm now in love with the name Hefa, and if that's okay, I will be using it. It's really perfect. You mentioned a lot of really interesting facts. I would like to just take a brief moment to just mention the fact that for entrepreneurs and those who are interested to engage in entrepreneurial activities, creativity does not necessarily, and innovation does not necessarily have to be regarding your product or service. Sometimes all you need to do is look at other countries, other demographic backgrounds, people from other socio-economic status or socio-demographic characteristics. So sometimes we're biased towards thinking that innovation has to come from the product or the service itself. It's not always like that. We can sort of have an impact by trying to change anything and everything that's out there. And may I just before handing the mic to Fahim, may I just remind you of the quote by Deleuze, who says, "To resist is to construct." So, and in order to construct, we just need to be innovative, not just in the context of the product and the service itself, but also the social context and the social environment, and the context within in the environment of embedded that the product or service is embedded in. So thank you so much for that. Really interesting points there. We will be coming back to a lot of them. I'm hoping to sort of have a heated discussion here. And Fahim, please, and thank you for your patience. Welcome. Hello.
No worries at all. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be sharing the panel with Tara and Emma. So my name is Fahim. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Pocket. We started the startup back in 2018. So I've been running for about 2 years now, just over 2 years. Just to tell you a little bit about myself and the backstory on myself. So I moved to the UK back in 2005 to pursue my higher education, to do my A-levels. I originally come from Iran, and the economy back there is dominated by public companies. And the ultimate dream is for youngsters to get employed by public organizations. But my dad was actually this creative person, even though he was a public servant. He always used to identify problems or come up with creative solutions. And we always had this chat in the car, traveling places, and he used to come up with different ideas. But I had no idea about private companies, startups, businesses, even though there is a big group of businesses out there who are private, but there is no publicity around it, or it's not like that everybody knows about it. So when I moved to the UK, I started watching shows like Dragon's Den, and it was mind blowing, that you can actually bring your ideas to life, and then you can receive investment for it, you get support around you, and then you can work on something that you're passionate about. So that took me to the field of entrepreneurship. I also wanted to promote entrepreneurship in developing countries to those youngsters like me back then who didn't know anything about it. So hence why I went to the path of doing a PhD. But throughout my studies, I used to work as a digital marketer. So as a digital marketer, it was funny. I used to work on campaigns for the likes of Sony across Europe, and I realized that the return on investment on ads was constantly going down, and people were not engaging with ads anymore. And when I looked at my own browser, I had an ad blocker installed on my own browser as a marketer. So that was when the idea behind Pocket came about, because it was funny that as a digital marketer, I didn't like ads. So we kind of thought, what if we could basically change the whole thesis behind the web. When the web started, it was on the basis that free information is provided to everybody in return for their data and attention, and hence why the problem with invasion of privacy, Cambridge Analytica, and things like that came about, especially in the last presidential election in the US. So I thought we need to give power back to the people, to the same people who brought about this economy and who basically make it happen. So basically what we do, we enable brands to create word of mouth, and word of mouth being the best channel of marketing or the best method of marketing. We enable them to create it through their community of customers. So if I'm a brand and if I have, let's say, 10,000 people following me on a social channel, why not encourage them to share their everyday experiences using my product and introduce it to their friends and family? So that's how Pocket came about. And then we've had 2 rounds of investment already as well. So because I know fundraising is something we are going to discuss, so I just thought I'll let you know so that we can cover questions in that regard as well. That's it. That's about me. And let the conversation flow, and then we can participate in other questions as well.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And Fahim, may I just say that I am also a proud fellow Iranian, and I'm really, really glad that we have such a diverse panel today, and it's fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to our discussion. Perfect, thank you so much. Really, really interesting concepts. Word of mouth. So it's kind of, it feels to me as in some sort of a back to basics, but still trying to sort of maintain this type of marketing, but in a more maybe adapted a little bit more to the to today's context, which is absolutely fantastic. We will be exploring that a little bit more, and because I do have a question that how you guys think would be the best idea to engage with the population that people want to engage in, to be able to sort of share their message or sell their product or just expand their network. We will come back to that. But right before that, I would like to, well, obviously we have all experienced quite fascinating things due to COVID. COVID-19 pandemic. I'm interested to know how your business has experienced the late restrictions, and if you could just tell us a little bit, have things really changed, or have things got like a little bit harder, or there were also some opportunities that people usually, when they think of COVID, they tend to miss. They think that it's all about like how it has sort of restricted us, it's horrible and all that. So if you could just share how your business has experienced the latest pandemic, if we could start with Tara.
Okay, well, I have a consumer product, consumer packaged goods company, right? A CPG company. And therefore my experience is going to be the most depressing, I think, out of everybody else's. I think for small, what they call challenger brands, which is like our products. And I think a lot of sustainable and eco focused consumer packaged goods businesses have also experienced this as well. Our products are the kinds of products that are primarily purchased in a supermarket. So 70% of period products, for example, were purchased in a supermarket, and about 95 of them were purchased in a brick and mortar store. So whether it's a chemist or a supermarket or a big box store, that's how people used to buy tampons, pads, condoms, liners, whatever it is. And if you think about it, it was also part of a basket, right? So a lot of women will experience this. They get their period and they're like, oh gosh, I don't have any products left at home. I'm going to run out to the nearest shop, the local Tesco, the off license, etc. The alternative thing that happens is they're doing their weekly shop and then they think, oh yeah, I probably need some tampons. My period's probably going to come up soon. If it's something that happens really regularly, like people who experience bladder leaks, or the way that people buy condoms is a bit more foresight, because they're like, oh yeah, I'm running low and I have an idea. So they'll stock up on those things. But from our research, we see that period care is something that's really convenience driven. This also means that you're a basket of purchases. So it's not something you necessarily think of ahead of time, but it's something that you buy along with a lot of other goods, and you won't go separately and buy it. So and this is like a category-wide statistic when you look at sales and revenue channels and where people are buying things and how they're buying it. So it's kind of like soap, in the sense that you buy soap as part of like a bigger basket. You probably won't go to an eco-friendly soap company and just like buy direct from that website. Even if you get a subscription every month, that would be even though that'd be convenient because you use soap throughout the month, it doesn't mesh with how you currently consume. And one thing that Susan and I, my co-founder and I, decided when we started the business is our master's at LSE was essentially the executive MBA program that they have. So we use my dissertation, my MBA capstone, as as the research vehicle for Flow. So we did so much consumer research. We did primary research, talking to people, focus groups, surveys, but then also tons of the secondary research, reading the Mintel market research reports, the Kantar world data, all that stuff. And this was all, confirmed through that data. Pandemic kind of turned that all on its head, because we're sold in places like Boots, Holland & Barrett, Planet Organic, Whole Foods, and Amazon was like, we were a vendor on Amazon, so in a really good position. We weren't selling it ourselves. Amazon would buy it from us and then resell it. But we did like no sales through Amazon prior to March. It was so small. It was like 100, 200 pounds every couple of months. It was nothing. And we had a couple of e-commerce partners, but it was quite small. And then we had our own website, which was 5 to 10% of our revenue. It was really small compared to people who are like first digitally native and really focused on e-commerce and direct to consumer. That was not our focus. It was retail. So that's the background. And then COVID came along. And of course, it was totally accelerated the push to shopping online. And a lot of our retailers, the first thing that they did was turn off purchasing from all the small brands because they were really overwhelmed. There were queues to get onto the Ocado website, queues to get onto the Morrison's website. And that really hurt us. So the first couple of months of the pandemic, all of our main revenue channels, like hollandandbarrett.com, like all of those retailers, so they stopped ordering for in-store and ordering online for small brands. And then they kind of caught up. And so the past 6 months have been much better because now people can buy our products online and stuff like that. But it's a big shift from people, having a lot of our revenue come from Boots, people buying in a store, to people trying to buy our products online. And the discovery is a big part of that, right? Like, if anyone's ever seen our products, this is what they look like. This is how our tampons come. So they come in an ice cream tub, which is one of the reasons we did that, is because we knew we were a tiny company with no marketing budget, and we needed people to walk down the tampon aisle, and instead of choosing, the big brands, say, oh, I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to learn a bit more about organic and what this company does, how they give back, etc. So you do lose that discovery factor because now, like, someone's not seeing it on the shelf, and when they search, they're just getting all the top sellers right away. On the other hand, Amazon over the past year has become almost as big of a revenue channel for us as Boots. So we went from zero to doing a good chunk of our revenue from Amazon, and now like equal or more than what we earn from, for example, Boots. So that's been a really big change for us, going from being a brick and mortar company to a digital company. Luckily, our own website was also set up. So I wouldn't say we're digitally native in the same way that someone like Harry's or Dollar Shave Club or some of these brands who knew from the beginning our primary channel is going to be online, and then they went to retail. We did the opposite. We went to retail first, but we set up our website thinking, whatever incremental income that we get from this will be good. So the second thing that's happened over the past year is our own website, our D2C sales went from being, again, 5% to being 10, 20% of what we do. We started digital marketing, which we never really did before. We did tiny amounts, like less than £1,000 a month we spent on advertising, and we turned it off for months, etc. So we took it very seriously, and we grew, and with a profitability focus, like saying, okay, we're going to give ourselves 3 months to learn. And then after that, our cost of acquisition of the customer has to be break even or profitable based on the lifetime value of our customer as we know it. We're also lucky we're 3.5 years old. So we had about 2 years of data, and we can say, okay, after 2 years, we've maintained a really good chunk of our subscribers from 24 months ago. So, and we actually know how much they've spent over those 2 years. So we know how much we can afford to spend to acquire a customer. And I think one of the big challenges that new direct-to-consumer companies have is they don't really know how much they can afford to spend on acquiring that customer. And we're a low-cost item compared. Affording period care, organic period care, eco-friendly period care will always be more expensive. I totally appreciate that. So it's a privilege to afford it. But as compared to a lot of other direct-to-consumer companies, which can charge you £20 for whatever their product or service is, or 10, 15, our average product, including shipping, is like £5, right? So you really need a customer to subscribe for a while to get that money back. So it's been a very interesting experience with direct-to-consumer, and we came out the other end of it. We took COVID as an opportunity to properly explore that. And prior to COVID, we were thinking this will just be something we'll let run in the background for a few years, get incremental income from it, and go like harder in it when we have more budget and when we care a bit more. So that's definitely something we pushed. And then the third thing that happened because of COVID is global supply chains have been absolutely mad, and they're still mad. And Brexit's been a huge part of that kerfuffle, where between Brexit, COVID, and the holidays, which are thankfully behind us, a delivery that used to take 5 days to get to the customer in the Netherlands or France now takes 3 or 4 weeks, which is shocking. And deliveries from your factory, wherever you manufacture, now takes twice as long and costs 400% more. So that's something that we're not the only ones dealing with that. Anybody who has a product, a physical product, is dealing with that at the moment. And COVID has made that so much worse. So in terms of how did that affect us, aside from being more expensive, taking more of your working capital, extending out your cash cycles, the other thing it does is it made us hire a part-time supply chain manager back in like July or August. Whereas if you looked at our initial plan of like hiring, I think like marketing support would have been like hiring an exec level, grad level, which we're only getting to do now. That was something that we thought would come way before, and before expanding supply chain. But I think for every business with a product at the moment, supply chain and operations has become a huge source of, just a huge need for everyone. So yeah, that's what I can say. Sorry. I hope everyone else will be a lot shorter than me, but being a CPG business, you have, I think it's been a really tough year for anyone in the manufacturing and retail selling space. And so I just wanted to share some of that in case it's relevant to any of the listeners.
Actually, thank you so much for sharing all that. It's actually really interesting for all those who are interested in entrepreneurship, starting a business, or basically they just want to be informed of how businesses are coping with the current situation. Really interesting thoughts. Let's change this up a little bit. Fahim, would you agree with this? Has the same thing happened to your business as well, or were things a little bit different on your side? Emma, sorry, I'll come to you in just a few minutes.
Sure. I guess it differs from industry to industry. So the things that Tara has experienced would not necessarily reflect on what a tech platform like ours, whereby we just have an online platform experiences. In many ways, the COVID situation has accelerated our growth, just because many people are going from offline to online. This reflecting what Tara has experienced recently. So there is more money being spent on digital marketing, but at the same time, there is so much space on Facebook and other advertising platforms. So over time, it gets saturated. The cost of customer acquisition increases because you have to compete with other ads, and you have to spend more money in order to be visible to a certain demographic in a certain region. So once that happened, we had bigger brands coming our way, wanting to find innovative ways to promote themselves on social media in a more authentic way, as opposed to spending dollars on Facebook or Google advertising all the time. So I'm sure, as you all know, there has been a big increase in social and e-commerce. I was reading a report by McKinsey and Accenture a few months ago. I think it was towards the end of first lockdown. And both of them have increased by 160%. People are spending more time on social media. So social media consumption has increased by 30% as well. So these all indicate that the money should be spent online, and rightly so. But at the same time, trust is on the decline. People are more wary of where the products are coming from. What do they stand for? Is it environmentally friendly? So I think Tara's brand is in a very good position in that sense, because millennials and Gen Z take these factors quite seriously when deciding to purchase something, and it allows the marketing managers or marketing directors to play with that element quite a lot. But I mean, I've had 4 other startups in the past. So the first company that I registered was at the age of 19. And the first thing back then that I thought I needed to do was to register a company, and it never got to the operational stage. And then I had other ideas whereby they took off for a bit, but then they failed. So one thing that I personally learned, and I think it might be helpful for other potential entrepreneurs out there, one of the reasons why Pocket has managed to survive so far is the fact that I learned longevity is one of the most important things out there in the business. Most businesses fail within the first 3 years of their lifespan, and I just wanted to get Pocket across the line. And for that, you have to sacrifice quite a lot of things in terms of personal gains, and you have to stay as lean as possible, you know, keeping the costs to the minimum and serving the aims of the startups and serving the employees in a way that so that they go on and make your startup successful or your business successful, because at the end of the day, the company is nothing more than the people who are making it happen. So that's what I learned before COVID, and it helped us when COVID happened. In terms of other things that we've experienced very quickly, so in the past, whenever we got a big client, we had to travel to their headquarters. Let's say Johnson & Johnson was one of the clients that we met before COVID. So we had to go to their headquarters outside London to meet the team. And there was quite a lot of back and forth meetings that you had to have with them. But right now, you can do the same over Zoom, and things can happen a lot faster compared to how they used to happen before COVID. So in that sense, things are, in terms of customer acquisition from a B2B perspective, things have been happening faster. That's it. That's what I can share.
Fantastic. Yeah. I think I do agree that sort of because the virtual environment and online environment is now the thing, a lot of transaction costs can now be cut a little bit. That is the thing. And also, it's really, really interesting for me because what I'm studying, by the way, I'm studying psychology of economic life at London School of Economics, Department of Psychological and Behavioral Sciences. And this is my second MSc. My first one was in economics, and I've also studied business as well. So it's a really nice combination of like consumer behavior analysis, the psychological mechanisms involved, and it's really interesting that all of you have pointed out the fact that it is important to pay attention to the psychological aspects of the consumer. Like, for example, it used to be, consumption used to be about function, but nowadays it's more about meaning and experience. So we're kind of trying to send a message by the product that we're using. Like, for example, if I go for flow, I want to send the message to my community that I care about sustainability. So it's not just enough to sort of just to advertise a product or a service. People also care about who is making them. How is this being made? This is what fair trade and everything is all about. What's the story behind this business? And these are really fascinating concepts that I do hope to sort of. I do hope we get the chance to sort of dive deep into. Emma, how was your experience? And I think your experience must have been a little bit different because, well, we're all talking about people who usually have access to internet, computers, laptops, so they can sort of easily shift from an in-person environment to an online environment. But has it been the case for you as well, for your business in particular?
Yeah, thank you, Atrina. It's such a great question. And I loved hearing what Fahim and Tara also had to say about this. I think each industry has had their own quirks during COVID. And it's fun to swap stories here and hear what everybody else has been journeying through. So let's see, how has our consumer, I guess, when I think about the way COVID has affected our company, I think there's two angles here. One is the external and how the customer and our product has experienced COVID. And the second is the internal and how we as a company have grown and transformed during COVID times. So I guess starting with the external, since you had a great question around that, what we've seen, so I think I forgot to mention before, we're building a digital bank for women. That's pretty straightforward. We're launching in Mexico. that's kind of the short introduction. So the thing we've actually seen is that during COVID, women have been disproportionately affected, specifically in emerging markets. And that's kind of for two reasons. One is the fact that women work primarily in the service sector, so they're more exposed. So they're either taking more risks or they're out of a job. And then the second is that women tend to shoulder caregiving duties, which means they're at home with the kids or with, parents-in-law or someone with disabilities, and they're taking care of more people in the home since more people are in the home. So with those two factors, what we see is that women are actually more in need of financial services now than they ever were before. So they're seeking out new opportunities to get those. And on your question of, how that relates to the customer's access to the internet, what we see is that in Mexico, actually, most of our potential customers already have a smartphone. So they are accessing the internet, but you're right that the behavior isn't yet there for them to look for a digital banking solution on their phone. So I actually just talked to a woman last week who said her mom is a teacher and has been working her whole life by cashing her paycheck at a cash checking service. And you guys probably know this from Iran. Like, it's very common. You wait in line, you give them your paycheck, they give you cash, and then you pay your rent, pay your grocery bills. But this woman was saying she really wanted her mom to get a bank account because, it's COVID times. It's not safe to be having to walk, once a month to the check cashing service, wait in line, have that exposure. So this woman had taken her mom to multiple banks, and there was different obstacles at different banks. They had to do with the woman not being able to afford the deposit minimum. They had to do with the fact that she didn't have the proper paperwork. She wasn't able to prove her occupation well. So there was all of this gray area. She wasn't able to open a bank account. This process went on for 8 months. And this woman I was talking to last week said, I'm so excited to give my mom a Hefa account because she can just download this app on her phone and finally be able to get a direct deposit for her paycheck and manage her money from there. So for us, I think that's a really exciting moment that COVID has illuminated, is the fact that people are looking for solutions now that are digital, and we're there at the perfect time saying, here we are, come, let us help you. And then I guess just quickly on the internal of how COVID transformed our company, I think it's important to highlight too, that COVID was a journey for all of us as entrepreneurs. I loved hearing Tara and Fahim's stories too. And one of the things it's taught us is that running as a distributed company, meaning a remote first company, is actually super effective. And my core belief is that talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. And we can therefore use that to hire the best talent wherever they are in the world. So we have engineers in Kosovo, we have a team member in Honduras, we have someone else in New Zealand, and that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't built the company during COVID. So I think that's a really exciting side effect too. I'll go ahead and stop there. I'm excited to hear from the other panelists as well, but I'm glad we've all made it through this time safely. It's good to see you guys on the other side. Well, I don't know, we're getting to the other side.
Yeah, you hang in there, guys. It's actually really interesting. Sustainability is now the thing. People are constantly talking about it, and it really is a major concern. Our consumption patterns of behavior and everything, we all know that this needs to change. But there's a problem. There's a huge gap between developed countries and developing countries. And this gap has always been there. It's not just it recently emerged. It has always been there, but it is also there for sustainability and concerns over sustainability as well. Emma, I would like to ask you just one more question before moving to Tara and Fahim, because I think they also have really invaluable experience to share with us. Would you say that promoting sustainability and promoting a sustainable service or product is a luxury that developing countries cannot afford yet?
Yeah, that is the question of the ages. It's a fantastic question. What we do see, especially in the millennial customers who we're talking with, they're really interested in sustainable solutions. And I think sustainability can mean a lot of different things. It can mean, more ethical production. It can be, in my field in finance, it could be green investing. But we definitely do see that draw. So I think it's the future of all industries that we need to go green. In finance, you see it as ESG, which is like environmental, social, and governance, and it's the way people manage funds. And I think that will increasingly be more in demand globally. And the fact that we do already see it with our millennial customers in Mexico means, Mexico is an emerging economy. I think it means that we're probably going to start seeing that same trend pick up elsewhere. So I'm excited for that. I've got my plant behind me. I'm already going green. We need more of this. So yeah, it's a great question. I'm excited to hear what Tara and Fahim have to say too.
Absolutely. Well, ladies first. So Fahim, hang in there a little while longer. Tara.
Oh boy, that's a tricky one. You know what? At the moment, it's definitely a privilege, and it's not just a privilege for developing nation populations. It's also a privilege in like developed world, more developed economies. So one thing that really shocked us is that really significant percentages of schoolgirls, for example, in the UK and in the US cannot afford period products. And that's why one of the two arms of our giving is to charity is in product form to charities like Bloody Good Period and the Hygiene Bank, who then provide period products to populations in our countries that can't afford them. So, I mean, I think it was something nuts. Like at one point, it was even 20% of the school children couldn't afford. And also when you think about our poverty levels in our quote developed economies and how many people are on benefits, and those benefits don't often consider period products because a lot of those policies were crafted by people who don't menstruate. That becomes clear. So I would say that, having eco-friendly and sustainable products across product categories is a privilege, not just in developing nations, but also more developed economies. I can also say there's a couple of things that help this. One is that the more it becomes a mainstream thing, the price of production of those products drops, and we can all afford to price more profitably. As materials, as we come up with more and more kinds of eco-friendly and sustainable materials. So for example, we use organic bamboo for our pads, and that is much more affordable than to procure than organic cotton, and also better for the environment. And you're seeing the same thing in hemp and like on our side in textiles. When we have greater material diversity, that helps with affordability and availability as well, because you don't get these bottlenecks where there's only so much cotton, for example, or hemp that can be used. So I think, as the sectors and the interest increases, this does help, because eventually the supply catches up with the demand and the prices fall. And I think, like it or not, corporates have a big part to play in that, whether it's in the services sector or whether it's in the manufacturing sector. When the corporates bring their energies and their pounds and dollars to more sustainable offerings, we can all kind of catch up and take part in that. And then also sometimes they're able to sell at much lower margins because they're so big. So they can create affordable versions of sustainable products. They might not be 100% of the way there. Like a small brand might be doing it 90% of the way there, and the bigger brand is getting 60% of the way there, but it's still an amazing alternative to the original, traditionally quite plastic heavy or whatever the equivalent would be in services option. So yes, I think we all have a part to play in making it more affordable, and it is changing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, while my question was on macro level, you really interestingly mentioned that this is also true on micro level as well. I remember having this because in consumer psychology, and basically when you're analyzing the psychology behind our economic behavior, the fact is that when you ask people like for example, regarding their food choices, you would hear a lot from people from lower income levels that they would say that I don't choose what I consume. It's my income level that chooses for me. So while it's really, really great to be able to consume eco-friendly products and all that, but I'm not quite there yet. So, and this is a problem on macro level because we now have concepts like degrowth that they say that, okay, we cannot afford this unlimited economic growth anymore because our planet will inevitably collapse. So we really need to rethink our paradigms. And while this is really interesting, but there are a lot of countries out there, whether on macro level or on micro level, people still are looking for this unlimited growth. We still have this unlimited growth mindset, both on individual levels and on societal levels. So I do think that it's a pattern of behavior that holds true for both micro level and macro level. And thank you for pointing that out. That was fascinating. And Fahim, share with us your experience. You're from a although I personally really don't like the term using developed or developing or whatever countries, I don't like these categories, but how did you experience this? How do you think, tell us about your experience and your thoughts.
Sure. So when it comes to the topic of sustainability, I think there's always this discussion on the corporate level, whether as to they're doing it for the sake of the environment or is it for their marketing activities? Is it to show themselves in good light as big corporates? But whatever it is, I think it reflects the reality. And if those brands are FMCG brands, so fast-moving consumer good brands like the likes of P&G, Unilever, or any other brand out there, the reason that I think corporates are taking it seriously is because the society at large is also thinking of it as one of the essential things that we need to take care of. What I mean is the environment. You would also see that on the investor side. So if you look at the investors in the European ecosystem or in the US, the kind of businesses they invest in right now, many of them need to be sustainable in terms of how they source their products, how they operate, and basically what they stand for. So I think if you're honest with ourselves, investors are out there to get a return on their investment. And then if they can protect the environment, then that's a big plus as well. So again, I think that's just another indication that there's a demand for it. So if there is a brand out there with a low sustainability score, then they need to change. And I've seen many big multinational companies out there that have realized this point and are moving fast towards this. So we've recently started working with Unilever, and they have recently taken over a vegetarian food brand called the Vegetarian Butcher, and it just shows that, and they've made an investment in that field because they think there is a demand and they're growing in that field, and that field is growing at the same time. So the direction towards which industries are moving towards, I think, is a reflection of the problems and the demands of the society at large. And with this brand that I'm talking about, which we are working with at the moment, so what the software does, we scan through social media databases, we find out who are the diehard fans of a brand, and then we have an automated way of identifying them, messaging them, and onboarding them. And then we get to basically analyze their posts, the captions, the sort of conversations that they're taking part in with their content. And when you look at those, it is what consumers want to stand for. So if there is someone out there sharing their recipes with their friends and family, it's not just the product. So the product needs to stand for so much more. It needs to stand for a future in which we want to live in, whereby we are eating less meat, let's say, those of us that are interested in reducing our meat consumption, or those that are vegetarian or vegan, they want to basically protect or to improve the welfare of animals. So there needs to be something that the brand or the product or service stands for, so that people gather around it, create a tribe around it, and they go on to spread the word about it, to advocate for it in the long term. So that's the piece of insight that I can share from our experience working with a few brands out there.
Thank you so much. So we started with broad topics. Now we really want to narrow it down and sort of explore what this all means for all the entrepreneurs, or the future entrepreneurs that are watching, or they are actually attending this, or they're watching it later. So imagine now that at this state, we have an entrepreneur, she has an idea, she has a story behind the idea, she's ready, and she wants to get started. But she needs resources, funds, mentors, partners, and it's really hard to know where to get started from, where to go, and something that you really have to sort of approach intuitively, isn't it? Emma, how would you say, what is your, I don't want to call it really advice, but what's your own, share us your own experience with us. You need funds. No matter how good your story is, no matter how good your idea is, you need to realize it. And in order to be able to realize it, you need the help of others and you need some resources. How can we get our hands on those?
Yeah, such a good question. I remember starting out asking myself that over and over again and living on Google. So I'm glad you're starting this conversation, so we can all learn from each other here. One thing I was just going to add on the previous topic, I was thinking about sustainability, and one last thought that came to mind on that was that we actually have a lot to learn from emerging economies as well. I think what we often see is more developed markets are the ones polluting, and in emerging economies and developing countries, you see a lot less pollution in general, and you see a lot of reuse and recycling out of economic need. So you might find someone who buys a Coke but then reuses the bottle for months at a time to fill water and take it to the park when they go for a run. So I was just thinking about that and thought there's interesting lessons we can also still learn from emerging markets too. But yeah, on the question where to start, such a good question. Let me think. There's three things I think you absolutely need to get started. One is people. The right people to support you. You mentioned mentors, friends, family members. And I think those people serve two different needs. One is to support you and just cheer you on and tell you can do it. And the other one is to actually help you tactically. Like in the earliest days of building my company, my mom was on our Notion page, building the company with me, giving me ideas. She still does. So I think that's really necessary to have that kind of advice and support. The second thing you need is funds. And what I'll say on funds is that you might not need as much as you think. So when I started Heffa, I didn't have any money, any funding, nothing at all. And I thought, okay, how can I get the funds that I need to run this company? And I estimated I was going to need like $500,000 to get this digital bank off the ground. So what I had to do was figure out a scrappy way that I could prove that this concept is worth pursuing, this digital bank for women, and then go to investors and say, hey, I have this idea and here's some proof that I've been hustling to get, that there's people who are interested and there's a market opportunity here. So what I did in those early days was I ran ads on Instagram and Facebook. I didn't have Fahim's platform. I needed it then, are actually relatively cheap. So you can just put in like $10. I mean, that's also assuming that's like $10 you may or may not have, but you could see if you can get a part-time job or a side job to get that little bit of extra money and put in just a few dollars here or there to run ads for your idea and then build a wait list. I think that's like that was our secret weapon. Is we ran ads, built a wait list, got to a wait list of about 10,000, 15,000 women in Mexico who wanted our product. And then I built up a deck, basically a pitch deck that you bring to investors. And I showed them, see, I have 10,000 people who are interested in this. This is my idea for the product. And if you give me money, I can go build it and bring it to these 10,000 people, which can make you X amount of money. And for them, that's a really clear sell. Like 10,000 people, if you monetize that, is a significant amount of money already. And that's assuming, that we'll be able to grow from there. So I think that's kind of the trick to raising funds, is finding some little hack around way where you can get some early traction, whatever that looks like for your industry. In our case, it was this waitlist as a proof of interest, and then bring it to investors. And add me on LinkedIn if you have questions about how to even find investors. There's a lot of nuance around that. So I'm happy to chat with anyone who has questions. And then the third thing I would say you need to get started is just a lot of hustle and grit. And I know that's a very vague thing, but what that means is a lot of energy spent on Google, watching videos, learning how to do everything like Tara did, from design to being able to build a financial model, to being able to, maybe even write some code for the product. And I think, the entrepreneurs who have made it in the world, if we look at all the great examples, they've all had that hustle of like, I'm going to, at the beginning, be the person who does everything for this company. And that can really pay off. So I think LSE students are perfectly positioned to be entrepreneurs because we are so multidisciplinary, and all of you have that kind of inner strength of being able to look across disciplines and work across them and build something up. So I'm excited to see who these next entrepreneurs are.
Absolutely. And I would consider this a shout out to all those who think dog walking or babysitting is a waste of time. You can easily fund your Facebook ads, people, so don't underestimate them. You mentioned something that I really I just can't pass this on. I want you said that at some point you decided that your idea is worth pursuing. How did you make that decision? Was it a gut feeling? Was it a rational decision? Did you do a lot of cost benefit? Or was it something that you had a feeling, you had a voice inside you saying that, Emma, you need to go for it?
I love that, Atrina. That's such a good question. That is such a good question. That is the one question that if we could answer, we would all become entrepreneurs. For me, the moment was, I was in the middle of quarantine. I was locked down in a village of 6 people in northern Spain. And I was just going on a lot of long walks. And there was this idea that was stuck in my head, which is 1.4 out of 1.5 billion people of the world are women who don't have bank accounts. And like, there's such a problem. Like, that's 1.4 billion people. If you think about that in terms of market opportunity, I mean, in Latin America alone, it's $10 trillion worth of business that is not being done. So from an economic perspective only, it was so interesting. And then when you get even deeper and think about the social side of it, which is the fact that you can empower women and help them reduce vulnerabilities, create new opportunities, I just thought, this is massive. Like, why is no one doing this? And it was so stuck in my head, this question of like, why is no one doing this? So that was the question I tried to answer. I looked everywhere for people who were trying to solve this problem. And I thought, whoever's solving this, I'm going to go work with them and I'm going to make this solution the best there is. And I couldn't find anything. So I thought, okay, there's my answer. Like, I've got to build this. And I think that journey is probably similar to what a lot of entrepreneurs go through, thinking this problem is massive. Who's solving it? And when the answer is no, you're like, okay, yeah, it's got to be me. So I think that was my moment. I'm curious to hear Fahim and Tara's too.
Absolutely. And right before moving on to Tara regarding funding and the same question, decision making is something that CEOs and entrepreneurs are actually famous for. Some even would say that the most important task that CEOs have to engage in is decision making, decisions. And it is actually really, really also simultaneously, while people actually think that CEOs are really extremely rational human beings, there are studies that say that founders and entrepreneurs, they really actually trust their gut feeling quite a lot. That's why they're risk takers. We also had this discussion with our panelists from yesterday as well. And I personally think it's a fascinating topic because I hear it a lot from young entrepreneurs asking that, okay, I have this idea, but I'm not sure how to think of it. What should I do? Should I like go? I didn't know really what to do with this. And so moving on to Tara, tell us, how can we sort of get our hands on resources for our ideas? And also, when you first had the idea for Flow, how did you address it? Were you thinking of, is this going to make profit for me? Or were you thinking of, okay, this makes a lot of sense and I just feel really nice about it, so I should go for it?
So Susan and I had our aha moment when we were a few months into the term at LSE, and we had quickly become besties, and we were in the bathroom we were in the bathrooms chatting between classes. We probably were a bit late, running a bit late for one of them, etc. And she was saying, we should start a business. And I was like, yeah, cool. It was just dream talk because neither of us came from that background. She was like, what should we do? And we were batting back and forth some ideas. And, you know, we were like, well, it should be around wellness, something, it would be great if it was around organic and vegan and natural. And we should give back, obviously, people and planet, we want to do that. And then because we were in the bathroom, I was like, oh my God, what about organic tampons? I cannot find them anywhere here. And I had just moved from LA to London, and I'm not from LA. I just need to make that super clear because there's like a big NorCal, SoCal divide. I'm from San Francisco, but I had been living in LA for a few years. And in LA, as many people might know, there is a Whole Foods on every block. And it was very easy to find organic tampons. You wouldn't really buy it on Amazon, but you would go and get it at your like local Whole Foods or whatever. It was very easy. And then I moved to London, and there's probably, I think, like 10 Whole Foods in the entire United Kingdom. So there's actually not as many. We have a lot of Planet Organics in London, but yeah. So I was like, what? This is a thing. And she was like, why do you even need an organic tampon? And I was like, oh, okay. So there's an education piece around here. And then it was one of those things that just, it did not leave us alone. We thought about it all the time. We talked about it to our friends. Our friends then thought about it all the time. And we're like, I've been thinking what you're saying around organic tampons. Like everyone would think we invented the concept. And we were like, no. There's been a brand or two that's done it since the 80s. But what we're saying is it should be affordable, accessible, and adorable. That's what we want to accomplish. So I can't, and I think most people who've had an aha moment, it then didn't leave them alone. And then they did a lot of research around it and they talked about it from everyone and they got people's feedback. But I think intuition is really important, both in and gut instinct, especially when your startup really starts getting off and running. You're so busy, you really follow that 80-20 rule. So 80% of the time it works out. 20% of the time you make a mistake, you lose money, or it takes longer time or whatever, but you really hope that the 80% outweighs the 20%, and a mistake in the 20% isn't massive. So it's the same kind of thing. That kind of intuition and gut instinct, whether it's from your aha moment or whether it's in running your company, it only really works if you're rooted in your values, if your vision is clear, and if you have the facts around you to guide you, and that's part of those values and such. So when you're researching your idea, if you start way in the beginning, when you have that first gut instinct, you have to be really honest with yourself. You have to say, okay, somebody else has tried this model and it didn't work, and it probably won't work for me too. Sometimes you can say it failed because this, and this. And if those failures were terminal, like if there's a real reason in consumer behavior that'll be very difficult or cost a lot of money to overcome, and you don't have those advantages, you probably can't do it. Or if somebody else has done your idea and they're doing it well, you probably shouldn't do it. And I always say, like, we started Flow almost, 4 years ago. I definitely wouldn't start it today because there's been a couple of, maybe my other product lines, yeah, but the original period care lines, there's been a couple of brands who have come out in the years since we launched, and now there's too many people. And like, I really think not all of those needed to start. And this happens in every industry, right? So you also need to think about whether you're really adding value. And then the other thing about gut instinct is, like, again, if you're rooted in your values and you have the facts and you can make that rational decision, because if it's anything fear-based, it's probably the wrong decision. So you need to look at it, really carefully. And then in terms of just raw resources, the internet is a great one. And I wouldn't just look in your country, look in the US as well, and look in other markets. The reason I say US, I hate to have that bias, but the thing is, there's a lot of money for startups in the States. So there's often ideas like yours that have already been funded, and you can learn a lot from them. It doesn't mean you shouldn't launch it in your own country or in another region, but you can learn a lot from them. And then the other thing that we did is, like we said, talking to people, but we also formalized it. So we got WhatsApp groups that we had focus groups, and then we turned them into WhatsApp groups. And it was often friends and friends of friends who won't be as annoyed if you're bothering them all the time with questions about, like, here are 5 names that I think this product should have, or like, here's 5 different ways I'm thinking about pitching this product. What resonates with you the most? So there was a lot of informal stuff that we then formalized. And those people really become your cheerleaders as well. Those are the people that fund your Kickstarter. That's how we launched. We did a Kickstarter. But yeah, and then the other thing is, if you are at university, use your library and your database access, because you'll be able to access for free Kantar, Mintel, Euromonitor. There are so many market research reports that now, as a business, I get asked to pay thousands of pounds for, which we don't do. But I actually know a lot of other founders who do buy those market research reports. You have free access to them as a student, and you can go to the British Library. You can, for free, register with the Business IP Center at the British Library, and you can access all of those for free as well. But you have to go there. You have to be, like, physically present. And yeah, I think that's what I would say. If you want market research, if you just Google, it'll cost money. Like, they'll try and sell you something, but you have amazing access as a student or as anybody looking to start a business at the British Library's Business and IP Center.
Wow, fantastic. I personally did not know any of that. Thank you so much for sharing that information. And just before we move on to Fahim, quick question. You mentioned that you launched with Kickstarter, right?
Yeah.
Would you recommend this to a certain type of businesses, or how do you think we can sort of land our funds?
Kickstarter definitely works well for product-based businesses because it's like pre-orders. It works better if your product has a higher price point. It's very hard because, like, if your product sells for £3 in a store like ours does, we basically said, like, okay, you have to buy 3 years worth of tampons to give us like £100, right? So it was a lot of people who we did give them a year's worth of tampons, for example. We had a lot of backers like that. But also, people who just really wanted to fund the story, which was 2 women, like, as many people might guess, most period products and most products that are marketed towards women are from companies, massive corporations where the board is all men, white men, and the CEO, probably a man, probably actually the president of the division that makes products for women is a man. I think this is all changing now, but I think there was a lot of people who were really interested in, wow, having women in this space making products for women, and actually not even that, for people who menstruate who might not identify as women. So by vaginas, for vaginas, as we say. So I think Kickstarter is great if you have a really compelling story, and if you have a physical product, it's easier to pre-fund. It also works. Kickstarter is a very specific thing. And I think in the beginning, I did a Kickstarter like 13 years ago when I was a musician. to like help fund studio time. And then I was like, everybody can get a record, you know, like here's a CD that people can have. It works great for that kind of thing too. And back then there was a lot of people just looking to fund cool projects. Now it's very much a friends and family thing. So it does really help to have a network, and to say like, you know, have your friends say like, pass it around to their work colleagues. You really need a lot of that. And the massive Kickstarters that you see, usually, I have a friend who had one where this absolutely didn't happen, and he had he sells e-bikes. So he had incredible growth, just from people catching on and pre-ordering e-bikes. So he raised like 300,000, he had like 300,000 pounds worth of pre-orders. But most of the time when you see those kinds of massive Kickstarters, 20% of the funds were already given and assembled and like pre-agreed upon with other people. So sometimes investors will say, I'll give you 20 grand, put it into your Kickstarter. That makes it go a bit viral and gives it momentum and goes. So I just think everybody should know that Kickstarter and a lot of these non-equity crowdfunding platforms do require 20% of your target funds to be given beforehand. And we didn't have that, and it made it a lot harder. And I mean, we raised about 14,000 pounds, which is quite small as like big Kickstarters go. And it was really through a lot of graft and a lot of like £5 to £100 donators and stuff like that. So just so people know, I think Kickstarter is a good platform, but there's a lot of things that can make it easier. And if you don't know them, it's a lot harder.
Fantastic. You said something that I think will stick with me forever. You said people fund stories. That's really interesting. And there's like a hell of a lot research behind that, why that happens. And it really is true. So yesterday and today, as a moderator and as an attendee myself, I have been constantly experiencing this huge shift from tangible economy to an intangible economy, where your social capital, your human capital, your values, your beliefs, your stories is really, really important and significant. So it's not just about profits anymore. That's really interesting. And that is something to consider if you are to be a future entrepreneur. Thank you so much for that. Kickstarter, people, it really sort of lands us on crowdfunding, which is a perfect moment to give the mic to Fahim. Fahim, you worked in a crowdfunding company, am I right? For more than 10 years.
The digital marketing was my experience for over 10 years, but I also did work on a crowdfunding platform, a social crowdfunding platform, funding about 45 projects across 22 countries, helping raise $1.5 million. So I can definitely echo what's already been said by two great entrepreneurs here on this panel. Crowdfunding is a great way of getting this social validation for your idea and finding out if the problem you're trying to solve has enough demand in the market. And often what you see, as Tara mentioned earlier, with both reward-based crowdfunding as well as equity-based crowdfunding, investors will match the funding that you collect from the audience that you're targeting. So they will often commit something in advance in terms of a pending transaction. So if that goes through, if the project raises the full amount, then they will pay you the money. So it's a great way of finding out if the problem you're trying to solve has got legs, if I can put it like that. But I think we've spoken about the idea as well as getting the resources to bring that idea to life. In terms of the idea, so I was myself one of those people that would come up with ideas, a good amount of ideas every week. What's important to bear in mind is that considering where you stand, we talked about investors investing in stories. So where do you stand in that story? Are you coming from that field? Have you got experience in that field? Or if you don't have, how passionate are you about that field? And what have you done with that passion? So, for example, if I work in the digital marketing space and if I want to launch a restaurant, let's say, there is no relevance. And if I went to investors, they would ask me as a digital marketer, how would you convince me that you would launch a successful restaurant, let's say in London? So there needs to be some sort of background to your story to show that you're credible enough to raise that investment. So that's in terms of ideas, in terms of like, let's trim down the number of ideas that we have to the set of ideas whereby we have some sort of expertise, experience, or passion about them. So that gives you focus. The other thing that I think Tara mentioned was about some sort of evidence. So a big part of it can be secondary, where you search through databases. But I really liked what Emma said earlier as well. You also need some primary data. So if you can build a landing page, put some money on Facebook ads and find out how many people are ready to sign up to that business or to that idea that you have, is a good indication whether that idea will be successful or not. And at the end of the day, you got to have some bias towards action. So you need to take actions and you need to find out if that idea is good or not. Just talking about it with friends and family wouldn't take it anywhere. So you either need to launch a landing page or build a sample of it, launch a crowdfunding platform, or at least have interviews with your potential customers, or have focus groups, so on and so forth. One thing that's quite interesting, so there is one early stage accelerator in the world called Techstars. They invest in tech startups, and they have 6 different criteria when they invest in teams. And they've invested in quite a lot of unicorns already. So the six conditions the checklist that they have on their end starts with team, and then it is market, then traction, and then the last one is the idea. So the team is the most important thing. So if you've got an idea, can you convince others to join you on this journey? Can you find partners? Can you work as part of a team, or are you a one-man or a one-woman team? So nowadays, it is very rare that investors invest in teams with only one founder. So they want to see at least 2 co-founders, or in a perfect scenario, 3 co-founders, one of them taking charge of becoming the CEO, the other one taking care of the product or the technical aspects, and the third one taking care of the marketing aspects. So the team is the most important thing, because the idea changes every day when you start working with your target audience. And it is the team that make the business successful. So university is a fantastic place to find like-minded people, to find friends you can work with, because founding a business is not too dissimilar to getting married with someone. So you got to work with that person every day. You got to settle on disagreements. You got to come to conclusions together. You got to make compromises, and you have to stick around for the sake of the startup, just like couples stick together for the sake of the family. So the team is the most important thing, and often you see teams or startups fail because people don't get along with each other. And then when you want to find resources, of course, you got to be resourceful. Just like Emma mentioned earlier, you got to find interesting or out of the box ways of getting some sort of traction. Traction doesn't mean revenue all the time. It can be signups, it can be pre-orders. So you gotta find evidence around your idea and proving that it works. And then the first place that you should be looking for money, if you can't bootstrap it yourself, are friends, family, and foes. I'm sure you've heard of the 3Fs. So friends and family are a great way of getting the initial money in the bank, the few £1,000s or the couple of £1,000s that you need, or other people that would just trust you because they know you and they trust you and they think you can do it. Then they will lend you or invest in the startups. And then once you launch the business, you get your first few clients, then you can go after the early stage investors like accelerators, incubators, and hopefully angel investors and VCs later on. So that's what I can say. Hopefully it's of some use to others out there.
Yeah, fantastic. I just have one question before I move on. And interestingly, you mentioned teams, which is exactly my next topic. But right before we move on to that, I just want to ask you, Fahim, imagine that I'm an entrepreneur and I want you or your company to fund my idea. What are the first things that you sort of check for?
So so basically when I was trying to raise funds, I applied to every single accelerator in the UK and I exhausted the list. And it was back when Brexit was taking place. There was a lot of uncertainty in the market. That didn't take place. Then I looked into the European ecosystem. There was this German investor called APX, which is a joint venture between Axel Springer and Porsche. And the thesis that they have is that every founder is worth 1 million euros. Regardless of what the idea is, if the founder ticks all the boxes, that founder is worth at least $1 million. 1 million euros. So they typically invest 50,000 euros in return for 5%. In return for, yes, 5%. The team is the most important thing, and the people who have founded the business. And in the interviews, they want to find out how much you know about your industry, how much you know about your business. Is it just a random idea that came to your mind, or are you someone that knows this industry inside out, whether through experience or through any other means? So I would say if you're going for an early stage investor, let's say you've just launched a startup and you're going out there looking for investors, if someone tells you, show me your balance sheet, show me your profit and loss accounts, show me how many pounds you've got into your bank account so far, you don't want to be, or tell me when you will give my money back to me. Those are not the investors that you want to work with. You want to work with an investor that shares your vision and will be with you in the long term and will stick around in the long term, put their resources in helping you. And yeah, so basically I would say your personality, your experience, your expertise are the most important thing. If I were to invest in any startup, but I'm not in no position to do that at the moment, by the way.
All right, fantastic. Well, really, there were some really, really great points that were made by all of you. Interestingly, Fahim, you mentioned how partnership is much like marriage. You used the famous marriage metaphor, and to quote my father, he says that, well, in marriage, worst case scenario, you will get a divorce, but it's not as simple as that when you want to sort of break a partnership in a business, because things get a lot complicated with all the equities and shares and everything. So it really is a tricky thing, and it really, as you all mentioned, it really is sort of important. My take from what you all said was that it's crucial that you know yourself, So know what your values are, what you stand for, what you like, and all that. Know the people around you, know your social context, and know your resources. And when I say know, I don't mean like having data. I mean being able to connect all this data and creating some sort of knowledge out of it, which will then be your asset, and then you can milk that later on. So really interesting. So now we have the entrepreneur. She had an idea, she managed to fund it, and she has her team. But when is the time to sort of, the thing is, how flexible should we be in a business with our team? When is the right time to sort of say no to everything or start rethinking the partnership and all that? Emma, would you like to sort of share your thoughts on this? It is quite depressing and I do hope that never happens, but it does, because the startups do fail, especially because the team is not maybe the perfect team, the people are not like-minded, et cetera, et cetera. So what would be your advice on this situation?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I'm glad I get to go first here because I have lessons learned from a rough and tough experience. My last company didn't work out, partly because there was a mismatch between the visions with myself and my co-founders. So this is something I experienced firsthand. And while I'm super excited to now be starting my new venture, of course, when you start a company, it is like your baby. So you want to take the rocket ship to the moon. So it was hard for me to leave my last company, but my co-founders and I just had really different visions for where it was going. And I wanted to take it one direction. I wanted to do certain things. I wanted to build a certain culture, and my co-founders wanted to go another direction. And, I thought this is a good time to split ways. And I think that the best thing we can do in those moments is think about all we've learned and all we've journeyed through, and how grateful we are for that experience, and then create a really amicable relationship to split ways, friendly. I still cheer on my last team so much. I'm so excited for all of their successes. So I think it happens. It's really common. Something like 70% of startup teams split up. Don't quote me on that, but it's at least 70. It might even be more. I would say that if you're building a company or you're ever starting to work together with a team and it's not working out, know that that's actually part of the process of building a company. Is usually a few team members will go before you actually get to the right team. So with my current company, I'm a solo founder, which is very uncommon, especially among women. So what Fahim was saying is spot on, that it's a lot harder to find investment. So what we did is basically when I was first starting out and I realized, okay, investors are looking at me and thinking this is a riskier investment because this is just one person and an idea. What I had to do was surround myself with great teammates, even if they weren't co-founders. So the way I did that was I found the best and brightest. I found so many amazing people. I also found people from companies with really big names like Apple, Snapchat, Facebook. So I could put those logos and say, like, trust me, we're reliable. You've seen these brand names before. It's kind of a hack that I think a lot of entrepreneurs will do, is have their first hires be from really well-known companies, so investors look more favorably on them. The other thing I also did was bring on a board of directors. So one of my board members was one of the first employees at Twitter, and she built the company there from the ground up. And the other one is the co-founder of Kiva, which you might know, Kiva Microloans. So she also went through the journey of, lending out billions of dollars through Kiva's platform. So with these two women on our board, I was also able to say, look, I may be alone here, solo in this journey, but I have these powerful women and team behind me. So with me, alongside of me. So I think that was a huge strength. But as I'm going through this process with my current company, I just have the same mindset of, if things don't work out, that's fine. And that's great, actually. And that's part of the process. And my, the thing I always want to keep in mind is that I want to value people first. So if my, any of my teammates ever want to leave Heffa, I want to be like, yes, go. There's more opportunities for you, and I will help you find them, because I really think, entrepreneurship should have a very open door where anyone can come and go from. So that's a bit about my experience. I'm excited to hear what Tara and Fahim have to say.
Yeah, fantastic. That really is interesting. I also had experience founding startups, and the exact same thing happened to me as well. So it's completely normal for people to figure out more about themselves or their teammates as they go along, and then for any reason they might feel like this is not the place for me to be, or this is not the people I want to work with, and that's absolutely fine. We don't need to perceive this as a failure. Perhaps that's maybe not the thing to do. And it's common, as you mentioned, Emma, for startups to fail because of the people not being sort of like-minded, or just not being the ones that they want to work together and all that. I also share that experience, and it's fantastic. And thank you for sort of trying to destigmatize that in a way. Tara, have you had such an experience?
I've been really lucky that like I run my company with my best friend, and I often say that like you shouldn't start a company with someone just because they're your friend or best friend. In fact, you shouldn't do that just because they're your friend. And in fact, you probably should think about it extra hard if they are your friend. But Susan and I, we were in LSE together in the same degree. We had the same sort of interests. And I think one of the things that made it really clear over those couple of years that we would work well together was, because our degree was a 2-year master's, was that we had the same values but different skill sets. And that made it much more complementary. And that we both put the company and our friendship before ourselves. So for example, when it came to things like equity split, when it became really clear that, you know, one of us was able to give more to the business to the other, like that person could come forward and say, look, right now, I'm not able to work for the business as much as I wanted, or as much as we both thought. My equity should be less. And then the other one of us could be like, oh my God, like before it even became an issue. But I think that's really rare. And I think it is as it should be, right? We should all be able to look very transparently at a situation and say, wow, I'm not giving enough, or wow, that other person can't give as much as we had hoped. And then what can we do about that and tackle it head on? And yeah, I'm really, really lucky that Susan is the kind of person as well who is, you know, feels the same way that I do, is that our friendship is worth like so much. And also we really want this business to succeed. And how do we balance those two things? So I think over the 4 years of working on Flow, that's something that we've both done, even when there's tough decisions around options and equity and titles as well. Because also as you grow in a business as well, like everybody starts out, co-founders start out as C-suite execs, right? And as you grow the business, it might become clear to you that your knowledge is not enough, and that someone who has, it's totally not the case. There's loads of founders who stay CEO forever, stay COO forever, stay CFO, CTO, whatever. But at some point, you might be a CTO who discovers that there's someone who knows more than you, or the business has like outgrown your own abilities. And then you have to make some tough decisions. I think your number one priority as a founder is always, you know, within the business is the success of the business. Of course, mental health is also really important. Your relationships are also really important. And then you have to think, am I getting in the way, etc. So these things should be looked at both fluidly, allowing for room as you grow, but also putting your own ego aside. As with everything in life, the result is better when you put your own ego aside and you go, okay, right now I can see that I'm feeling like fearful or envious or anxious, or because I'm worried that I'll be left behind, et cetera, et cetera. And if you notice there's a lot of I in your feelings, then it's something that you should just acknowledge and be like, okay, but what's best for this business? And sometimes it might genuinely be you, and sometimes it might not be. And again, I'll echo what everybody else said, is that team is so important and culture is so important. It starts when you're a startup, like being really intentional about your culture and your values and recruiting on those values is really important, because otherwise it creates itself and it might end up turn into some sort of like 10-headed monster, or it might just be a really stressful place to work, and then you won't keep people around. So for us, that's all things that we've thought about, whether it's team or, and I have a slightly different approach. I think Emma's approach might be the best one, where she said, oh, it's an open door. But for me, I'm like, no, come and stay. Don't leave. And we have we're an amazing team. There's only 3 of us full time and there's 4 of us part time. But even the part time ones, we make a real effort for them to come to all the socials, for them to be treated basically the same, because we want this like family that grows with us and that stays with us over the years. And then, yes, of course, because they're so amazing, I know that if they ever came to me and said, I'm leaving for this amazing opportunity, I would be like, of course you're leaving. You're so much better than we are. And like, of course, I'm here to support you in your journey. But until then, quite selfishly thinking, I want them all to stay.
Wow. Well, fantastic. Fantastic. Well, you guys are all a really nice bunch to work with and work for. I can say that for sure. But yeah, really interesting. You mentioned important concepts like culture and how your culture is important, but also the culture within your startup, the type of work environment, the values that you would like to practice within your business are also quite important. And you really need to have some sort of a similar way of thinking and a similar mindset with your co-founders and your teammates regarding all these values and everything that you would like to practice within that startup. Fahim, you were the person actually who mentioned the importance and significance of teams. When would you say is the time to consider dismantling it?
That's a very good question, because quite recently we had this dilemma on whether to let someone go in the team. So essentially, as I'm sure all of you have heard about this quote, take as long as it takes when you're hiring someone, but when it comes to firing someone, fire them quickly. And in order to decide whether someone should be fired or not, I think what we do at the startup, every year we set targets for everyone, and we want everyone to hit those targets. And every quarter, we kind of review the performance of every team member. It's not that we would fire someone if they don't hit their target, but it is the expectation that we put in place. And if there are any issues not hitting that target, then we want to communicate with each other. Why is it that we are not hitting our target? Is it because of an individual? Is it because of the team not working well with each other? Is it the culture? Is it something else? So that's the first step when it comes to thinking whether we should let someone go or not. Other times it is for the whether the startup can sustain the cost and the wages or not. So if, for example, you're going through a difficult period, and if you have to let someone go, then that's a difficult decision that the founder and the CEO has to make, because otherwise you're risking the livelihood of others working in the company or the startup continuing to survive. So it is a very difficult area of discussion, even for myself. I hate it when you have to let someone go, but sometimes you just have to do it in order to protect the startup and to protect the company. But yeah, performance is where you start. If you see someone dropping in communication or not communicating their problems, if you see someone not participating in discussions or not getting their tasks done, then that's when you start thinking about firing, if I can put it that way. I don't know whether that answered your question or not, but
yeah, absolutely. That's actually fantastic. And I do understand that we are well over time, so we need to wrap up this panel. And honestly, thank you all so much, Emma, Tara, Fahim. It was a pleasure to have this discussion with you. Thank you for your patience, for sharing your story, all the invaluable information and insight. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us, Atrina. Great to meet you, Fahim and Tara.
thank you.
Nice to meet you guys. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.